savvy viewers of my content might be aware of the fact I was born in Beverly Hills. Why? Why was I born in Beverly Hills? Why did I start my life there? Well, the reason I started my life there is because Beverly Hills is actually right next to another neighborhood that my father worked at, Hollywood. My dad moved with my mother over to Los Angeles to work in the visual effects industry back when the visual effects industry was just starting up. I mean, I'm talking the early 90s. And I mean, it was certainly a thing by then, but it was not the well-established titan of industry that it is now. My father had some talent for it. He came over to Hollywood. He eventually, when he did well enough that he could afford the rent, he settled down in Beverly Hills so that I would grow up in a safe neighborhood with a good school district. Because again, my father moved to Los Angeles in the 90s, i.e., at the height of the crime wave. The idea of settling down in a safe neighborhood where I could walk around freely at night was something that my parents felt very important about. It was very important, and I thank them for that. My dad continued to and continues to work in the visual effects industry for my entire life, and for my entire life, because he is a good man, he's advocated for a VFX union. See, most elements of Hollywood movie production are unionized. Makeup, lighting, stunt artists, pretty much everything that goes into making a movie, they're unionized. Why, you might ask? Well, they were industries formed back in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, back before Reagan. And additionally, they were all purveyors of specialty knowledge. Imagine you're working in Hollywood back in the 1930s, and you have like a group of people in your profession who know about cinematography. Now, knowing about cinematography in the 1930s is not something you can just take a course for. You can't just go online and get like a brilliant course on cinematography. We're talking about like an elite group of highly specialized, well-trained, practically a guild in terms of their knowledge. I mean, there were like actual industry secrets. There was an incredible amount of specificity and lineage in the art form. So they were ripe for a union. I mean, could they collectively bargain? Yes. Yes, they could. Unfortunately, visual effects workers, more specifically people who work with like CGI, like computer-generated imagery, like my father, that whole thing didn't really kick up until after unions died in America. And as a product of that, and the fact that many people who work in visual effects are tech bros, not only did they not push for a union, a lot of them didn't want one. My dad, when I was growing up, my dad would always gripe with me, this frustration, because my dad isn't a tech bro. He likes technology, but he's always been a social democrat with a strong interest in art. His interest in the field is not born of some kind of distanced STEM elitism. And it's not for a lot of VFX workers, but it is certainly for some, and a lot of the people who act that way did end up finding themselves in positions of power within the VFX community. And those types of people tend to be economically libertarian. They didn't like unions. As a product of this, the history of VFX workers in Hollywood has been getting raped anally nonstop by every studio that wants to use their labor. This begins, of course, with monstrously poor working conditions, extremely short deadlines, no real engagement with or communication with people who do VFX work, therefore no understanding of how it's done or what needs to be done in order to get it done. You'd have constant problems with people things up on set and trying to fix it in post, fix it in VFX. How many times have you heard that as a joke in Hollywood movies? Like, oh, we'll fix it in post. That's a problem. Like an actual problem. As in, they don't know how to work with VFX departments, so they'll do something unworkable in the cinematography, like actual shooting stage, and then they'll just toss it over to the VFX teams and say, oh, well, you fix it. You have 6 months. What? This is the problem with them not having a union. Things have gotten worse and worse and worse, and now it's gotten to the point where, as is the case with basically all industries that don't have a union, a lot of the labor is outsourced. So two particular places it gets outsourced to is Canada. Canada has a ton of young VFX workers who will just have projects sent over to them by Hollywood studios, and they'll do it for the cheap. And if I recall correctly, I think India has a lot of work in there as well. Maybe because of the Bollywood stuff. I think it's mostly Canada. I think where this work gets done. Basically, the consequences of no union protection have led to really, really, really bad outcomes for people who work in VFX, including my father, who continues to gripe about it to this day. Folks, do I have good news for me? I don't really care if you care. Marvel VFX artists taking first step towards unionization and Hollywood strikes. That's right! After decades and decades and decades, Marvel Studios VFX workers have filed to join IATSE. And this is a huge step forward for VFX workers and for Marvel Studio workers to be leading the charge. I mean, that's quite meaningful because not only are Marvel Studios like the biggest studios, but also, or is the biggest studio, but also because Marvel requires so much VFX work. Like, this is what every shooting process looks like for every movie they make, all the time, nonstop. They have actors, and the actors will maybe interact with one or two set props, but for the most part, it's just them engaging with each other in a green void that they then toss over to professional artists to clean up, with essentially no job protections. Oh, did I talk about job protections? Hey, it's contract work, by the way. Like most stuff in Hollywood, VFX workers, if your VFX team gets a project to work on, you get a project to work on. If you don't, then perish, die, actually. Yeah, it's not good. Visual effects artists working for Marvel have taken the first step toward unionization in a notoriously poorly represented area of the film industry. According to a statement from the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, a group of on-set VFX artists employed by the studio have filed a petition with the U.S.'s National Labor Relations Board. Hailing the move as, quote, a major shift in an industry that has largely remained non-union since VFX was pioneered during production of the first Star Wars film in the 1970s, the IATSE said a supermajority of Marvel's 50-plus VFX crew had signed authorization cards indicating they wish to be represented by the union, which already represents around 168,000 technicians and craftspeople in live theater, film, and TV. So you might be wondering, 50-plus VFX crew? For Marvel Studios? Yeah, they contract out. But change has to start somewhere. Like, seriously, this probably represents like 2% of the total people who work on any given project, like from a VFX perspective. It's insane underrepresentation in terms of like how much work they just get from elsewhere. But, the change has to crystallize from somewhere. It doesn't instantly happen everywhere all at once. VFX union. Oh, I should follow them. Please. Announce the formation of our union and filing for an election. Yeah, this is what all movies look like behind the scenes, by the way. See? You have a, it's so... This is supposed to be a Pegasus, by the way. So here's a bunch of dudes in green suits that are going to move the Pegasus mount up and down to simulate the movement of a horse. And then here's some dudes right back here. All of this is built in computer. Everything is built in computer. Marvel movies, it's all built in a computer. I want you to understand what this is like for a VFX worker through an analogy. Okay? Imagine if, I'm trying to think of the best possible analogy that I can, okay? Imagine if the makeup teams in Hollywood were not unionized. They were just contract makeup artists who were just brought in, Now imagine, in addition to everything that implies and all of the poor treatment that suggests, they would engage in, basically at every systemic level, behavior that makes their job harder, Like, imagine if there were no on-site rules about, humidity or temperature control, so people's makeup was constantly running down their face, and they would constantly call these contract workers over, for no additional pay, of course, to retouch their work. And when the contract workers, the makeup artists, are like, can you turn the AC on? They're like, what? Why? What? Shut up. What? You're fired. That is literally what CGI work is like, where you are a professional VFX worker, and they will just send you shots to work on where they have it up royally for your profession. They have made it so hard from your side of things, and they just don't care because you're just contract labor. It doesn't matter, The person who owns the manor does not like have his banger parties in a way which is conducive to the interests of the like barely paid help staff he hires to clean everything up afterwards. They're just like laborers to them, not artists. But the artistry you see in these films is largely an artistry of computer work. Not to say the actors don't do stuff, of course they do, but it's a collaborative process. It's ridiculous. It's sickening. Somebody in chat asked how my father feels about this and if my father is involved. No, my father does not work for the Marvel Studios VFX team, so he doesn't have anything directly to do with any of that. As for how he feels about it, let me scroll through my replies. There we go. Pray, Father. And then he said about time. So that's how he feels about it. We'll see how it turns out. If you don't care much for Hollywood or for VFX workers, I think you should, for one. But if you don't, just keep in mind that the representation of unionization in Hollywood, pivotal towards the normalization of unionization in America. Hollywood is the cultural epicenter of America. It's the loudest soapbox microphone combo. It's as out there as you can get. The more attention, the more respect, the more credence given to unionization in that field, the more it will be thought of by American workers as something worth pursuing. Imagine your average American warehouse worker or delivery driver thinking, man, if people over in Hollywood are getting screwed and they're unionizing and they're getting concessions, what could I do? Like, even if people even like that have to unionize, what about me? Will this help so that AI won't take over animation? Would probably also be a good step, I'd say. You wouldn't want VFX teams to constantly cut down on the cost of labor by promising results to Hollywood studios and then working on the shots they're given with like heavy AI supplementation. That would probably not be good. I wouldn't like that.